the circular fillet command allows you to create a circular-shaped fillet wherever a closed surface comes in contact with any other surface. Here's a really cool example. Let me go ahead and create a plane, and I'll just hide the grid out of the way as opposed to moving the plane up, and we'll create a cylinder, which I'll scale up like so. Now, let's say I wanted to create a fillet that would make a blend that went from the surface of the plane right onto the surface of the cylinder. I can do that really easily by going under Edit NURBS, come under Surface Fillets, and choose Circular Fillet. Now, if we open up our options, we have a couple of real easy options on here. First off, we have Create Curve on Surface, which I'll switch off for now because I'm going to talk about it just a little bit later. You can reverse the primary surface normal or the secondary surface normal, depending on which order you selected these, should you need to flip them around. By default, I leave these right where they are, and you'll see why here in just a second. Then you have the radius, which is going to be the circular arc radius of the fillet you create. We can also adjust that after the fact, so I usually leave that set to 1. And then we have Use Tolerance, where we can control whether or not we're using the global tolerance under our preferences or a local tolerance for position and for the tangent of the fillet on each surface. So we're actually using more than just positional tolerance for once. Let's go ahead and create that. I didn't mean to just close the window and walk away. We'll just run that, and here's what we get. Now, hang on a second. Let me undo that. Let me go back into the tool for just a moment, and let's make sure I switch off Curve on Surface just for now. Like I said, we'll come back and talk about that here in just a moment. And here's what we end up with. A surface fillet, a separate surface right here, that is a blend between the surface of the plane and the cylinder. It really was that easy. We just select the two surfaces, go to Edit NURBS, Surface Fillet, Circular Fillet, and we're done. Awesome. There are 4 separate surfaces we could theoretically create to blend in between these two surfaces. This is just one example. Let me go ahead and go to wireframe so you can kind of see how these are lining up. You can see the 4 separate examples as well as kind of what would happen if you were to reverse the normals within the tool. Notice earlier when I was talking about inside of Circular Fillet, we could reverse primary surface normal or secondary surface normal. As opposed to doing that, you can make adjustments here in primary radius and secondary radius and get the exact same effect. For example, if I were to take primary radius and set it to -1 and press Enter, look what happens to the surface. It now flips to the other side of the primary surface. If I were to set that back to +1, then take secondary radius and set it to -1, you'll notice that we flip now to the inside of the secondary surface. Go back to wireframe. And then if I set both of these to -1, we're on the opposite side of the primary and the secondary, which you can see here. Now just really quickly, watch this. Let me go ahead and just create a few more of these. I'll grab these two and I'll hit G, and I'll set this one to -1 on primary. One more time and hit G, and then -1 on secondary. And now in this example, you can actually see all 4 of those filleted surfaces, all 4 possibilities right here, which is a really cool effect, by the way. Now, what happens if you want to use this in such a way where it looks like you have a physical blend between the plane and the cylinder, so it looked like maybe a pipe coming out of the wall that had a hole in it? Well, that's where the Create Curve on Surface that you saw earlier in the options is going to come into effect. Let me go ahead and delete out all these fillet surfaces for the time being. I'll select both of our objects again, go back to Edit NURBS, come down to Surface Fillet, open up Circular Fillet, and this time let's click Create Curve on Surface. Now, I click Fillet. Now, because of my radius settings, I'm on the outside of both surfaces, which you can see here. I also have a Curve on Surface for the cylinder and a Curve on Surface for the plane. Now, they're both fairly simple-looking curves, but don't worry, they are on the surface, even if they appear to be kind of floating on the outside. Now I can come in and grab my Trim tool, and I can trim on the plane to decide which area I want to keep, like so, and then trim on the cylinder to decide which side of that I want to keep. And now look at this. It looks a little bit rough, but remember that we can go into the Attribute Editor and take our NURBS Surface Display for Precision on Shaded and crank that up. And now you can see what we have, which is a nice blended surface that goes between our trimmed cylinder and our newly trimmed plane. Very, very cool. The trim itself, the fillet, will need adjustment if you start making a lot of drastic changes. For example, if I scale this up so that it exceeds the size of the plane. In fact, let me go ahead and undo this back to before I trimmed, just to make this a little easier to see. Notice this really bogs down the machine to have to go through effort like this. And let's see, let's take our primary, here's our fillet here. Let's take our primary radius and we'll increase that a bit. Let's do this in the channel box, just be a little bit easier to see. Let's say maybe 2 by 2. And now as I scale this up, watch what happens when the fillet meets the edges of the plane. Here you go. Boom. Notice it starts to cut free. It no longer meets the surface here, so it's going to stop right here at the corner. This is one of those areas where you're going to want to make sure that your fillet won't overlap the edge of your surface. Just something to be aware of for later on down the road. Now, all you'd really need to do in this case is take your, I believe it's your secondary radius, and set it down to something that is within the bounds of your surface. So you can just play with those values until you get the look you're going for. Then, of course, again, you can trim those out if you need to. Very, very cool tool, and a great way to come up with an awesome surface that blends together. That's going to wrap it up for this video. Thanks a lot.